Well, welcome back to the not quite raining, but sure as hell foggy race podcast here.
Oh God.
A little bit late again. How are we doing though, otherwise?
Well, it was. I'm sure it was the same for you. Coming back to the cold from the warmth of Florida was a little bit shocking, but other than that, and being away from a racetrack again, and yeah, everything's good. Everything's good. How's your week and a half been post Rolex?
Chilly. That's putting it pretty light, honestly. It's been brutal. I think today was the first day it was above freezing at all, and I think we were like 1 degree Fahrenheit and Celsius above freezing today. So
Oof.
we're not doing too great, man. But whatever. It's not foggy. I'll give it that.
Yeah, and the fog, I'm sure, is going to be a constant. That's going to be a big discussion point on tonight's show. I think if we want to have a little bit of foreshadowing there.
Yeah. Well, we got a lot to talk about. I mean, we have, of course, the Rolex 24. It's been a little bit since you've seen us. I think it's about 3 weeks, 2.5 weeks since the last time we've been on here. Last episode, we're previewing the Rolex 24 at Daytona right before you and I headed down south ourselves. 24-hour race to recap. I really want to structure this sort of, you know the race at this point. If you haven't seen the highlights, at least, I'd be shocked. But we're going to, instead of just giving a rundown of everything that happened in this race, because there is a lot, and it is also difficult to follow when you're at the track. I have no idea how you sit there and make a video right afterwards without even leaving the place, because I'm as clueless as anybody at the end of a 24-hour race when I'm there in person.
Yeah, it's you know what? This year was a little easier than past years because we had such a long. We had the fog that rolled in, so I actually got to get a little bit of sleep during the night, which was quite nice. Maybe a little bit more sleep than typical in a 24-hour race. So that actually made Sunday surprisingly pleasant. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, you know what? I was thinking sort of the same. I don't know if you went back to the hotel. I got, the real luxury. We upgraded from sleeping in the stands to sleeping in the back of my friend's Cadillac.
There you go.
And out in the parking lot, lot 4, wherever the hell we were. The fog was really a perfectly timed event for me. I think I headed back to the car around midnight and said I'm going to sleep until about 3. And I think the second we got back is when you heard cars under yellow. And I didn't really miss anything. So got an early start to the day, got to go back out at 3, run around what is a very quiet track. I've said this plenty of times before, but I'll say it again. Daytona, compared to the other 24-hour races I've been to, is pretty unique in how quiet it really gets at night. The grandstands are very empty for how big they are. I was walking to behind the pit lane. You can see some drivers walking to and from their cars. Security is pretty lax, honestly, which is a bit of a pro at that time of morning. And it's a very interesting place to be, though, when it's 4 o'clock in the morning and you can't see 300 meters in front of you. Probably not even 100 meters in front of you at some points. Anyways, to summarize, though, going back to my original point, we're going to highlight on some of the things that we were looking for with this race going into the weekend and seeing how many of those held up. I can already tell you a bit of foreshadowing. Some of those things did not hold true, so we'll cover those. But if you have any questions about the race, I know we had some come in before the episode that we'll hit on as well. That's how we're going to approach the race the Rolex 24 review. Then, of course, we have a couple of hitting news stories to touch on later on as well. So get those questions in if you have them. I guess I'll start here because really the main thing I was looking for with this new season of IMSA, of course, starting at Daytona, is were we going to see a continuation of, call it what it was, the more critical, harsh stewarding that we saw from VIR onwards last year. And to a point, yes, that definitely was an aspect in this race. I do want to talk about a specific incident, though, which is the one between Philip Ellis and Nicky Team at the end of the race, GTD. Philip Ellis sort of, let's say it as is, drives Nicky Team as close to the wall as he possibly could. And I said in the last episode, there's one thing I didn't want to see with the stewarding in this race is for it to have an impact on the race results. I didn't want to have a controversial call at the end of the race that we look back on either that should have been penalized or that shouldn't have been penalized. Here we are, week and a half, 2 weeks later, talking about exactly that. So I want to start off getting your thoughts on that, specifically that incident. I know there are plenty of other things that we could discuss in the race as well, but that's a good starting point.
I guess I want to confirm which part of that is that the front straightaway, like kind of squeezing him up to the wall.
The famous picture.
Yeah. I don't know. Is it the worst thing that this was egregious as we've seen some incidents be in the past? In particular, some of what we saw at Road America last year. But at the end of the day, I don't know. I saw that happen, and it crossed my mind for a moment that that could be something that could be deserving of a penalty, but I don't know. Given the circumstances, I don't know. I think the non-call was probably the right call. I don't know. I think IMSA, the officials, they don't want to have that. I mean, it's still a talking point, I guess, post Rolex anyways, but it's probably more of a talking point if they give out a penalty that when this was with an hour to go, was it?
No, this was within the last 20 minutes of the race.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, they don't want that final 20-minute penalty call deciding the race. I don't know. Look, I can see both sides of it, right? Like at one point it was a very dangerous maneuver, right? That's one of the fastest points on the track for those cars going through the tri-oval. It almost ended in tears, and if it does end in tears where there's we don't get to see that battle come to fruition, maybe that does change the steward's decision or race control's decision, which you wouldn't want to have that happen. Of course, you don't want to penalize the outcome. You want to penalize the moment, the maneuver, the move. At the end of the day, though, yeah, like I said, I think it was a fine not call, but it's probably pretty borderline.
Well, that's the thing I would say. It's exactly that. It's a borderline incident. I mean, if he pushes him up another half foot,
oh yeah,
then Magnus is in the wall, and then you're looking at an incident that should have absolutely been penalized. I think I'm sort of on the same page as you. This was as close as you can probably get for not warranting a penalty, especially with how IMSA was stewarding that race up until that point. They were dishing out penalties with a few hours left in the race for contact we saw in GTD Pro. So, in that regard, I'd say it's far as Philip Ellis was pushing the line. Let's just put it that way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know what? I know in that moment that I wish. I mean, hindsight's always 20/20. And you're fighting for the win in the biggest race of the IMSA season. You just wish that you could go and be like, hey, Philip, you don't need to. You're faster than this guy. You're gonna get him. You don't need to squeeze him up into the wall and create any controversy out of this. But I mean, the race car drivers are race car drivers, right? They're gonna go all out for that move, and yeah, I mean, it hasn't been. I think it hasn't been as controversial as some of the calls or non-calls that we've seen recently. So that's good. But I think you kind of hit the hammer on the head there. IMSA was being pretty stern with what they were handing out penalty wise throughout the race. So to see this one, this was I want to know what the discussion was up in race control around this one. Only to be a fly in the wall there to hear what they were talking about when discussing this one.
Yeah, yeah. We need like that camera they have in race control at 24 Hours of Le Mans. You know, where they have the whole
Oh yeah,
looks
yep.
like Mission Control Houston in there. Um, there you go, NBC for next year. Um,
MLB does a really good job of that too. When there's a challenge on the field, they
well,
go
yeah,
back
we'll
to
just
the
send the
review booth.
we'll send the call to Charlotte or whatever, and
Yeah.
you know
Or I guess well no, it's up in I guess it's up into the grandstands at Daytona
that's
or
true. You're
in the
really just sending it
suites.
across the street at that
Yeah.
point. If you're going to IMSA's
Well,
HQ.
yeah, all you need is that just lingering camera in the back to see everybody jump into action and see what race control's doing. But
Yeah. I mean, on the topic of driving standards, though, I so full transparency, 95% of what I've seen and heard from this race was listening to it live on IMSA radio during the race. And what I did hear a few times at least were drivers in lower classes complaining about specifically GTP traffic. Kenny Habul was the first sort of driver to speak up about this. I don't know if you ever went back and were able to hear his interview that he gave on IMSA radio / IMSA TV about that. Don't have the exact quote, but indirectly calling the drivers a bunch of pelicans. Ben Keating in the nighttime hours of the race, early nighttime hours, gave a very confusing sort of interview as well, fresh out of the car. Just sounded completely sort of dejected by some of the moves that you would assume he was talking about the GTP cars as well, because he was talking specifically about the faster traffic. And, you know, it does bring up a bigger discussion about driving standards at this race in particular, right? Because we have a 60-car grid here. We have drivers at this race in all four classes that do not touch these cars the rest of the year. Does that weigh on IMSA's decisions in race control when they're calling out these moves? Is that something they're taking into consideration? I would imagine so. You know, I think the real question is going to come Sebring, right? When you have, because Sebring's going to be no shortage of incidents for sure. It's Sebring.
yeah, absolutely.
You're going to have fewer cars on track there, though, than we saw at Daytona. But more importantly, I think you're going to have the more veteran, at least Michelin Endurance Cup drivers. You're not going to have those one-off Daytona drivers in the field. And I'm curious if some of those complaints carry on.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like, at the end of the day, the drivers are always gonna have they're gonna have something to complain about, right? Um, they can't complain about BOP now because that's
They
not allowed.
tried. They tried.
They tried, but they can't. So they had to complain about something else. You know, I did see, yeah, Kenny the quote there, but I don't know how much I read into that. Like Kenny hasn't done that many IMSA races in his career, right? And let alone that many IMSA races, or how many times is he racing around the LMDH cars and a lot of these cars. So it is different compared to maybe a lot of what he's typically competing in. He's always competing, or usually competing in the GT3 ranks.
Yeah.
So there's like take that with a bit of a grain of salt, but at the end of the day, like we weren't seeing the prototypes getting dinged or even investigated by race control all that often. Like we didn't hear that they were under investigation for incident responsibility. I'm sure there were a couple, but I mean, I honestly don't know if I can recall one where a GTP car got involved in an incident that they were deemed responsible for. Maybe somebody in the chat knows, but I don't know. Again, I'm not out there racing in the car, obviously, but based on everything that I saw, I mean, I'm sure the GTP drivers would have a thing or two to say about some of the lower classes as well, considering the carnage that we had off the start. And and that we would kind of see throughout it. It's again like it's maybe a bit of a byproduct of Daytona. Like we always see these really close calls at Daytona, it seems like. And when you really you know, boil everything down, Daytona is not a super wide track. Like through the banking and stuff, like you can comfortably fit two cars there, but you know, that it's a spot where we frequently see prototypes quickly approach GT cars. And if you try and go three wide there, it does get pretty tight. Yeah, but it's definitely doable. And I don't know if that's some of the aggressive moves that we're hearing about from the GT and even the LMP2 drivers, but from what I saw, nothing was egregious. But again, it's a 24-hour race. I can't see everything. So, um, I don't know. Like the I thought the driving standards they were better than I was expecting, honestly. I think we talked about it plenty coming into this race, but yeah, I thought the driving standards were better than expected here.
Well, somebody who did get a better view of all of this, I guess, would be our man in the chat, Andrew Kissinger,
Yep.
working for the number 3 Corvette, who said the LMP. Listen, Andrew, you put this in our chat, so it's now public record, and I'm allowed to talk about it. But you said the LMP2 drivers are being weapons. Our car got squeezed about 700 times, I think, specifically talking about Logan Sargent getting run up to or Antonio Garcia getting run up to the wall by Logan Sargent. Yeah, I think that's really what I heard was just a lot of GT drivers complaining about prototypes, whether that is the GTP cars or particularly it sounds like more of the LMP2s probably. And as I said, this is a race where you're going to have drivers who aren't competing in the rest of the IMSA season. You have a record number of entries on the grid, so factor in that, of course. But I think Sebring is going to be the big question for me on whether or not, this is sort of we had some exceptions at Daytona. If they're under control at Sebring and beyond, well, then that's probably what we really want to see.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we can all afford a little bit of leniency, again, for a lot of the things that we've already talked about for the Rolex. But once we get to Sebring, that really sets up kind of the rest of the season. We don't have those one-off drivers in, everything like that. So, yeah, maybe it's worth monitoring, between how the GTs and the prototypes play together. But yeah, I'm hoping that it's not. I'm hoping that we don't have. Hopefully this isn't a big discussion as the season goes on.
Yep. Well, it's a point of pride for me in this episode. I get to put you on the spot and throw your predictions under the bus. Preseason, no. You brought up Wayne Taylor Racing, I guess, to that point, Cadillac in the GTP class, and expecting them to be a lot more strong this year than they were the past couple of seasons now. So I'll let you take this one. Of course, Cadillac was, the top force against Porsche in this race, and we'll talk about that in a little bit here. Ultimately, Porsche seemed to have this race under control, but I think for Wayne Taylor Racing, and that's really what I want to ask you about, is were you disappointed by what we saw from Wayne Taylor Racing? Did you expect to see more out of them, especially with what we were seeing out of the Action Express Cadillac team?
Okay, so what we ended up with Wayne Taylor is, of course, we had the 6th place finish from the 40, and then we had the 10 that blew up. They were the only DNF in the GTP class. They ran 22 hours, and then I think Ricky Taylor said on the broadcast that the gearbox let go. So I can't fault them too much for that. It's hard to get a good gauge on specifically how the 10 was shaping up. It looked like they had pace, maybe not race winning pace, but maybe they had pace to contend at the end for, maybe a podium is even a bit of a stretch, but sort of a top 5. The 40, of course, they finished just outside the top 5. Um, would I call it overall? Overall, yes, it would be a disappointment for the two Wayne Taylor Racing Cadillacs. Absolutely. I mean, you walk away. You're aiming for podium, top fives here, and you don't walk away. The best finish that you get is sixth. However, that being said, I think there were positives in terms of pace that the cars showed. The cars showed throughout the weekend that, at that they could be there. Cadillac as a whole showed that they could contend with the Porsches, I guess. I know that most of that load was being carried by the 31, but yeah, I guess to answer your question, overall a disappointing weekend for Wayne Taylor Racing, but it wasn't a complete disaster. I think that's maybe something to keep in mind is yes, sure, they had the gearbox failure on the 10. It's a mechanical failure. Like, it sucks. Those things are going to happen though. And I don't remember where they were running at the time where that failed, but I think that they were running somewhere in the mid pack. If not better, I don't know. I'll have to look and see actually where they were running. But I don't know. I thought Wayne Taylor Racing came out and they had a fine performance. Bit of a disappointing result, but I think there's positives to build on there as we head to Sebring, and a track that we've seen the V Series R win at. We haven't seen Cadillac win at Daytona. That's been a Porsche really dominated effort with the one Acura win in their year one. So we know that Cadillac is capable at Sebring. Let's see if Wayne Taylor Racing can build on that going into Sebring, a track that they actually won at, even though it was with the Acura a couple years ago.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. Well, I think the big question, the clock is rolling for them now. Okay, you're on the second year of that car, and I think this was a point that you made, which is you've got the first season under your belt with Cadillac. They haven't quite come out of the gate swinging like they did with Cadillac in 2017 when they were on that dominant championship run. For them to be pretty mid-pack at Daytona, I thought was a little bit of a disappointment. There was never a point where I felt like they were in a position to win that race. And maybe you could argue that nobody was in a position to win that race except Porsche. I will accept that argument. But moving forward, now we're on the second year of that car, for that program with Wayne Taylor Racing. I would expect the results to pick up, because where we've seen them falter in previous years is just not being able to break into podiums, not being able to find any race wins. And this is a year where they're going to need to be consistent in those results if they want to have a chance at fighting for the championship, because we're seeing the strength already from these other teams. Like Porsche's already, for the third year in a row, leaving Daytona, championship leaders.
Yeah.
So if that's what you're up against, then that's what Wayne Taylor Racing is going to have to achieve for future races.
Yeah, I was just looking back through here, and the 10 was running like seventh or eighth when they had the mechanical failure. But earlier that morning, and I like to focus on the morning. I feel like coming out of the nighttime hours at the 24, because that's when we really see your real race win threats emerge. And I guess podium threats as well. And all the Cadillacs were running pretty close together at that time, like fourth, fifth, sixth. The 40, the 31, and the 10 were all running there together. So, yeah, I think there's positives to take away from Wayne Taylor Racing in this one. If they don't have that gearbox give out, and things go a little bit differently, the final couple hours, maybe a little bit different strategy, yada yada, then we could be talking about a much better result for WTR. But yeah, I think they keep their heads up coming out of Daytona, because it wasn't an awful showing.
Yeah. Well, we've talked about it a few times already in this episode, already hinted about it, but Porsche. Lucky sevens for Porsche Penske Motorsport, and really, who's going to stop them at this point? Both when it comes to winning this race and then also being a top contender for the championship. Just said a minute ago, leaving the first race of the season as championship leaders for the third year in a row. If you look at previous years, that's a position that they get an early lead on and sometimes don't even look back from. So, and now you've got a lot of restructuring within that Porsche Penske program this year, of course, with the WEC program falling to the wayside. You've got new drivers in the lineups for both cars there. The question for me becomes, are they able to replicate what they've done the past 2 years? Are they able to take that car and maybe not fight for race wins at every single race? Because critically, that's not what Porsche and Penske are doing. They're just ridiculously consistent. I don't have the 2025 results pulled up in front of me, but if you look at the podium run that they were on from last year, if they weren't scoring race wins, they were podiums or at the worst, seemingly top fives.
Yeah.
And kicking the door down early, getting that early advantage already. I said a few minutes ago, do you think anybody really had the chance to challenge him in this race? Because the 31 definitely was putting up that fight at the end, as they were sort of deja vu back to 2023 here. Oh, sorry, 2024. God, we're already on the fourth year of these cars.
Yeah, it's wild.
It's sort of deja vu to a couple of years ago, though. And the general impression I had is that Porsche and the number 7 car had the race under control. Were they giving it 100% at the finish? Could they have gone a little bit faster? It just seemed like the 31 wasn't able to, number one, break into the lead. But if they were able to get to the lead, maybe the Porsche had a little bit more to give. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. Because we saw Jack Aitken get he got a nose up. Was it up the inside? Like they got to be side by side for the lead there in the final half hour of the race, and it just seemed like the Cadillac. Like maybe if the roles were reversed, then we could have said the same thing. Because I do think when push came to shove in that final stint, like those two cars were very evenly matched. I thought maybe the Porsche had a little bit more straight line speed, or was doing a little bit better on the straights, but the Cadillac would, Jack Aitken, they would close right up and be right there, seeming like just putting the pressure on every single lap. I mean, we say that Porsche's won 3 in a row at this race, and the last 3 years have come out of this with the points lead, but none of those wins have been like. I know that we're gonna say that Porsche was dominant in this race because they led X number of laps out of how many, like they led a significant portion of the race, but really when push comes to shove and it all came down in that that final stint, like it was a second and a half gap between the 31 and that winning Porsche, and it's been like that over the all 3 years that they've won this race. It was, was it 3 years ago? Was the 31 that was challenging them again? I think with Blomqvist behind the wheel, the 1 year that he ran with the 31, and then last year I think it was one of the Acuras. It might have been Blomqvist again in that final stint that was putting, and I think we said if they had one more lap last year, then I think that they would have got them, but. I don't know. It's not like Porsche when push comes to shove and it all the whole race is on the line that they're dominating over the competition. Like the laps led chart, whatever, it's gonna look like Porsche dominated this race, but it was a very close battle when it all boils down to it. And does that mean that what does that mean heading into the season? Well. Last year, it didn't mean a whole heck of a lot that it was a really close finish at the Rolex because Porsche was easily the dominant car in the first half of the season overall. I hope that that's not the case again this year. I hope that we do get good battles that develop through the entire season, and we don't see a runaway of any kind, through these first 4 or 5 races. But if you're the competition and you're seeing the amount of turnover and change that Porsche just had and what they were able to go out and do at the Rolex 24, man, you got to be thinking like, man, not again.
Can we give a shout to the privateer JDC Miller 963 as well? There were a lot of questions going into that race about, okay, they're running the 2025 spec car. The 2026 car is geared more towards these high speed circuits, Daytona, of course, being the most prominent of those on the IMSA calendar. JDC spent a handful of times up at the front, though, like leading
Yep.
some laps in the morning hours of the race. I was impressed by that. And they only ended up finishing seventh. They didn't break into that top five finish. But for the questions that were placed on them going into this race, it doesn't seem like running that year-old car is affecting them a whole lot.
No, no, it was an impressive. I almost, you know what I almost called it? I almost called it speed weeks. That's such a NASCAR term from the
Hey, we
early, or
should
like
bring
the
that
mid
back,
two
though.
thousands.
You
Yeah,
know,
yeah, speed weeks IMSA style. Like they were. I mean, there was a lot of coverage around, them being quick in testing, and then that um, coming over into the Rolex week as well. And yeah, I mean they just put together a solid race, right? Like they didn't have any significant problems that, come to mind. They just kind of ran their race. And I think if you're JDC and you're going out and you're running like five, six, seventh in a lot of these, in a bunch of these races, then you got to be pretty content with those results, right? You're running the older car, which clearly did quite well in IMSA, has a pretty good history uh, behind it. But yeah, they're not. It's not a factory driver lineup. Um, there's more experience and there's growing experience in the driver lineup that's on that team. But when you compare them to all these other GTP lineups, I think you can definitely say that they're probably especially experience wise towards the bottom of the bunch. So yeah, a really good run for JDC, and yeah, would you say a sixth, seventh place
seventh.
finish there?
Yep.
So yeah,
Yeah. Um, I guess the last point I wanted to make, and then there's a couple of people talking in the chat that I will touch on before we
yeah.
leave this race in the past, is GTD classes. Were we expecting them to be the star of the show in this race? I personally was, and if you look at the highlights package of the race, I didn't really put a stopwatch on how much of the time was spent focusing on the two GT classes, but I'm sure a lot of it was because
Mm-hmm.
talk about the images of the race. Last year, I think the GTD class or GTD Pro class gave us, the image of the race. This year, I think the fan was it a fan in the grandstands had that incredible shot of Philip Ellis and Nicky Team,
Yeah.
with Ellis completely sideways. Incredible that he saved that, by the way,
Mm-hmm.
even though he was kind of at fault for it. That to me is the defining image leaving this race again. And so we're talking about that. If you look at the end of the race, GTD had the most compelling battle for the lead. GTD Pro was a mix-up of a bunch of different manufacturers
Yeah.
and teams there as well. So for me, again, I would say star of the show. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. We've already talked about the moments there in GTD, or that moment, racing for the lead. But I mean, we kind of glanced out. We didn't even mention, some of the battles that took place leading up to that. The 27, the Heart of Racing Aston Martin, and the 44 Magnus, like they were battling really hard there in the final hour as well before the 27 ultimately before they faded a little bit. And I say faded, they fell what 10 seconds behind and still finished on the podium. So you know um but they had a great battle there. We also saw the 13 Autosport Corvettes. They battled their way up through the pack. Matt Bell in those final couple of stints was just a man on a mission, driving through the field, kind of like he did last year towards the end of this race that netted, the 13 the win. We saw a lot of manufacturers playing towards the front. We saw a lot of different teams playing towards the front, and really that led to a lot of fun to watch, racing. I mean, in GTD Pro, we had a BMW win, which, they were really strong here last year. We know that, and then got caught up in everything. Like they were really strong. The Mercedes were really strong as well. The 75 Express, of course, was right there with the Paul Miller Racing BMW at the end of the race. A cup like 2.2 seconds was the gap in that class. You had Windward Racing in their Mercedes, their first time in GTD Pro that they were right up there. You had the Corvettes that were really strong. I know that's gonna sting for Andrew a little bit. They were really really strong, and then ultimately had a mechanical issue on one, and then they still got a top five with the number four, and then you also had the likes of Porsche and Manti that were up there as well. So throughout this entire race, like you're watching these races unfold, and you have no idea who is gonna win, and I think that made it a lot of fun to watch both of these classes, and ultimately at the end of the day, I know that we had that one moment in GTD, but we didn't really have like. I think we can walk away from this race with these classes like remembering the really good hard racing that we had in it. There wasn't that crazy defining moment, but both of these classes came right down to the wire, which is what we've just come to expect from both GTD and GTD Pro.
Yeah, and you'll see more of that this season, without a doubt.
Yeah, yeah. If this is how they're gonna set the table for us, then I think we're in for a good one.
Yeah, well, as long as we don't, have a repeat of Detroit last year, maybe we got tipped over a little bit over the line there, but
True.
but yeah, overall, I guess I already said this. GTD Pro and GTD particularly were sort of the highlights of the race for me. And I know a lot of people, or some people earlier on, were saying that the race maybe didn't live up to the hype this year, whether that's just because we didn't see quite as much close battling at the top of the field in GTP. That is a fair argument, I would say, but at least from what I had seen between the two GT classes, I think they were carrying their weight.
Absolutely.
We did get a super chat from El Noob, so thank you for that, saying the penalty for AO racing was huge in the GTD Pro class. Now, here's where I'm going to put my hands up and say I don't even remember what penalty they got.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. I was going to try and figure out what exactly was referring to there.
Well, this is why we have a live chat. You can tell us what they got penalized for. I do
True.
know that they ran around with some damage during the race.
They lost the front bumper again.
Again, yeah.
Again. Wonder if is Rexy going to show up with braces again at Sebring? We'll have to wait and see.
Love their marketing there. Somebody was asking about, actually, it was also El Noob, asking about the Valkyrie, what was going on with them. Yeah, they were stopping a lot during the race. I don't know exactly what the issue was. I was under the impression it was an electrical issue.
Yeah.
But in the chat, you're saying the team said it didn't have electric problems. They were having issues, though, in the Roar as well, weren't they, this year?
Yeah, they had, they replaced an engine during the Roar, and I think they lost basically a complete day of track time.
Yep.
And then they were experiencing electrical issues earlier in the Rolex weekend. And yeah, they did have to go behind the wall. I mean, they stopped on track a couple of times. I remember that penalty that Andrew put it in the chat for us for Rexy.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, yeah. That was an interesting moment. We'll talk about that in a sec. But yeah, the Valkyrie came. They stopped on track a couple times. I don't think they brought out a full course yellow, but I do remember them starting and stopping a couple times, and they had to come into the pits. Went behind the wall, lost 15 laps or something, and that was fairly early on in the race, if I'm not mistaken. So, yeah, I thought it did have something to do with electrical, but I don't have anything in front of me that confirms that. So, regardless, I mean, a tough race for the Valkyrie, but it is their first Rolex 24. I guess you can cut them a little bit of slack there. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, first time at Daytona, I was a little bit surprised by the reliability issues. If you just have one issue that's recurring throughout the entire race, there's really nothing you can do about it. They were pretty
Yeah,
solid at Le Mans last year, and so I guess maybe that's why I had higher ups going into this one. Because up until this point, we've been singing the praise of Valkyrie. At the end of
true.
last year, they were on a really strong run in both series. Um, Daytona this year, it was sort of back to like middle of last year, right? Where they're like not really in there pace wise, kind of quietly in the middle to the back. And then, of course, you throw this on top of it, and it's just a race to forget for sure. But I'm still keeping my eyes on them for that momentum from last year moving forward.
Yeah, I think as we start to go to tracks for the second time for that Valkyrie, which they've had that full trip around the sun now. They're every track that we go to from here on out, they're going to have been at before and have raced at before. So, yeah, I would expect to see the results again improve from last year. And I don't know, I wouldn't read too much into this. It could have just been like an electrical gremlin that they were kind of chasing the whole weekend and really never got a great hold on. So, um, yeah, let's see how they go out and bounce back at Sebring.
Yep. All right, you want to talk about this because Andrew's informed us well that the 77 AO was a jump restart and they got to stop plus 60.
Yeah, that was a little bit crazy. I mean, I was watching the broadcast at that point, and I just remember thinking, you know, how on earth did Rexy get so far ahead? And I think they jumped a bunch of people too, if I'm not mistaken. Didn't they gained a few positions and was just kind of confused. But then you saw it come across the jump restart. I mean, you can't do it, right? I don't remember who was in the car at that point. Do you?
I don't even remember seeing it. So I remember hearing about the penalty, but I couldn't tell you a single other thing about it.
Yeah, I don't remember who is. It might have. I feel like it might have been King, but um, regardless, doesn't really matter. I mean, that did kind of ruin their race a little bit, right? Like that was fairly late in the going. They ended up finishing. They ended up finishing a lap down in GTD Pro, although I think, or did they finish 2 laps down? They finished 2 laps down, actually. My bad. So I think they may have lost a lap as a result of this penalty. And because there weren't too many full course yellows that we were seeing, especially sort of in the later parts of that race, they never had an opportunity to claw back in it. And it's not like the Porsches were dominant in this race. I mean, we saw them perform way better than they did the entire week in qualifying. I think in qualifying, there was all of them basically qualified last in class except for one in GTD that qualified like 10th. So it was a struggle heading into that race for the Porsches in both GTD Pro and GTD. And getting a big penalty like that is when you already don't have the pace that maybe you need to contend. It's kind of a backbreaker there,
Yeah.
a costly penalty for them.
Yeah. And I'm trying to think because when was the last restart we had? We did have a pretty long green flag run to the finish for the amount of time we did spend under yellow this race.
They changed up the flags analysis document, and it's not as easy to because now all the race control messages are in here as well.
Oh,
We
it's a
did have
mess.
we had a green flag after 21 hours and 44 minutes. So that's with 2 hours and 15 minutes to go. That was the last green flag. Um, that we had, and I don't think that was when they got that penalty. I don't remember when it was though. Unless if Andrew
Yeah,
posted it
we
in the
we had a
chat
few
now.
other restarts earlier in the morning, but I do remember the run to the end was for what it's worth at Daytona pretty long.
Yeah, it was. They got that penalty. Oh no, that was a different one. Never mind. Carry on.
Yeah, I mean does it really matter?
Oh, that
Or
was
we're doing this
nine
on the
and a half
spot?
hours into the race they got that.
Really?
Yeah, I didn't think it was that early. Interesting.
Okay. We got to pay attention to these things. It's so difficult. And, I
There's
can't be.
yeah,
I'm a busy guy. I had to come back and shovel snow. I don't have time to watch a 24-hour replay. So,
well, even still, like when you're bound to miss things on the broadcast too, even if you're just watching the broadcast. It's the beauty and the curse of a 24-hour race. It's hard to
yeah.
keep up with everything that's going on.
Yeah. Um, yeah, Andrew said 1948 elapsed time.
Oh,
Man.
oh,
Did you read that wrong?
yeah. I might have read the. No, I don't think I
Where are
did.
you pulling your data from, Andrew? You just give Stu the link.
I'm looking at it right now. It was at 9:30 in the morning. I got that mixed up. Yep. They put
Okay.
these two times right beside each other, so it was yeah, 19 hours and 48 minutes into it. So, thanks Andrew. Thanks for keeping us honest here. That's what chat's for, right? It's the beauty of these live
That's
episodes.
what our chat's for. I had a question come in before the episode from Johnny saying, "Am I right that the Daytona 24 had zero safety cars for stalled car, no contact occurred, and debris situations?" That's great if so. This is the type of situations we need to avoid safety cars for. Yes, absolutely agree on that. Um, Daytona's a bit of an odd one out, though, right? Because when you look at this track, there's a ton of runoff area. You're not likely to kick up signage onto the track like you would be at a track like Road Atlanta. I know you and I have talked in the past about, could IMSA could certainly use a VSC type situation for things like that. And boy, have I hounded them about that for races like Petit Le Mans in the past. I'm not sure to answer your question. I can't remember with the yellows that we did have if any of them were for a stalled car or just something that could have been covered with a VSC. But yeah, Daytona is a bit of a lucky track in that regard, I think.
Yeah, I think that there was a full course yellow for debris. Um, I'm looking back at some of these, and there was one eight. Well, this is 8 hours and 20 minutes into the race at 10 o'clock at night. There was something for debris, and I think there was a tire. There was a couple cars that lost tires, and I think this might have been for one of the like a tire that had come off. I could be mistaken, but I think we had one that was for debris. But it was in turn one, which it's in like I mean you can't send a safety crew like you like VSC like even a VSC. I don't know if that would cover that in turn one. But yeah, we didn't have any like I mean I think at Road America a couple of years ago we had like three full course yellows in that race that were for debris or something ridiculous like that. I remember there was a Mustang bumper, on the front straightaway. Like there was some crazy debris yellows that were going on, and we didn't have anything that I thought was, was totally crazy in this race.
Yep. We did have another super chat come in. Appreciate that from Elnib again. What is also what a disappointing race for Wright Motorsports? Yeah, they were the ones who got caught up with the was it the AF Corsa P2 car?
Yeah. Oh yeah, what a hard hit.
Yeah. Incredibly,
That
I somehow didn't even see anything about that until the following morning. Don't know where I was at that point in the race, but I guess I probably would have been working my way towards that area. So maybe that was one of those yellows that I was getting lucky with yellows. Like I was just out on the move somewhere, walking through tunnels, and then all of a sudden there'd be a yellow. So
Yeah, I didn't know about it right away either. I was out and about somewhere as well, and yeah, I just remember, got I think I looked on my phone and I saw that there's this big incident and was looking for a replay of it. It was pretty crazy. Glad that both drivers were good. Coming out of that, Adam Adelson had to go to the hospital, but was released. There was the other big hit for another Porsche, the RS1. in the first, 20 minutes of that race. Really a nightmare kind of spot to hit that, that pit exit wall where he did, and a bit of a scary one. But fortunately, it wasn't on the driver's side. So yeah, there were some really big hits. But yeah, bringing it back to El Noob here and Wright Motorsports, the Porsches didn't seem like they had great pace through qualifying and through the practices leading up to the race. But then they came out and they looked okay in race trim. They looked like they could salvage, a decent finish. Maybe probably not in contention for a win, but could salvage a decent finish. And yeah, Porsche, who you got to think is probably has a pretty strong chance to be in contention for a GTD championship. This is a rough way to start their season.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, let's close this one out with another thing we had coming before the show from Johnny again. Have a heart for us longtime IMSA fans who are not used to IMSA being part of the mainstream auto racing scene and have rather enjoyed it being our little niche in the North American motorsports market. Not anymore, I guess. Yeah, definitely. I think, good place to end our discussion about Daytona, because we had another, how many years in a row are we having a record but a record crowd at Daytona? There's another one this year. Certainly felt busy during the start and end of the race, especially at the start. You were lucky enough to have had that little pass to get you at the front of the grid walk area before they dropped the gate or the rope that was keeping the rest of us back.
I didn't actually get to beat the crowd out. I was a little bit late getting. I just lost track of time, and yeah, I was going in with everybody else. So
you were slacking then, because I bumped into you. I bumped into you like about a half hour before that started.
Yep, absolutely.
I thought you were already on your way over there.
I know. I had to swing back and get. I think might have had to get my phone, like my battery pack, because I knew I was going to go up to the grandstands in turn one after, and wanted to make sure I wasn't gonna run out of juice. So
yeah, that's essential.
So it was packed out there. I think you can see the photos. There's the photos that IMSA's posted following the weekend and everything. It feels like really that infield, the grassy portion of the tri-oval, just gets more and more packed every single year. And honestly, I thought it was a miracle that they could clear that out in time for the start of the race. There was like 20 minutes to the start of the race, and it was still packed out there. So, yeah, these IMSA races are getting very, very, very busy, especially the Rolex. And there's I'm sure you've heard the moaning and groaning from some longtime fans as well. It's like, oh well, are we gonna lose access like with IMSA blowing up like this? Like, I don't want it to blow up like this. But at the end of the day, like, there's a lot of good that comes from IMSA gaining more popularity. It should provide more long-term stability if the manufacturers see that growth in interest, and still a viable platform for them to ultimately market their vehicles in. That obviously leads to long-term stability in the sport, which is a very, very good thing. So, yeah, it makes it a little bit more busy on race day, and throughout the entire weekend. But it's a sign of a healthy series at the end of the day, in my opinion. I don't know if you've. I imagine that you're probably
ride the
similar.
wave. Ride the wave while you have it. I mean, that's what IMSA can do on this one. They're having incredible popularity now with this top class. There's plenty of people that are also just attending these races to go watch GT cars. Had some guys in the stands in front of me at the end of the race who were very clearly interested and had some choice words about what was going on with the finish in GTD. They've got the recipe right now. So ride that wave while you have it.
Did you see the fight that took place?
I did. I'm very upset I missed that.
Yeah.
Like, of all things to miss,
I remember I woke up on Monday morning and that's what I saw in my feed, or when I was going to bed on Sunday night or something. Like I saw that and I was like, man, why didn't I hear about this? Like these guys were, they were going at it, but apparently it was a group of they were buddies and maybe just had a few too many to drink and pushed one of
Oh, so
their friends a little too
the
far.
narrative of it being Corvette fans versus BMW fans is
Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't think that it was that spicy. I think it was, you know, they pushed one of their buddies a little too far and he cracked with a little sleep.
this is gonna be you and me next year. You know, get
We're
it
gonna
on video. It's good
drop
for
the gloves.
publicity. It's
Yeah,
good for
that's true.
publicity.
The Rain Race podcast goes viral. Yeah.
There you go. I'll just hold up a banner, mid swing.
Yeah. Yeah, you have somebody in the background just with like a flag or something, you know?
One more super chat from El Noob, which again, thank you very much for that. Which part of the track were you in, and what other things can you do besides watching the race once you are in? Well, Daytona, I've said this before, is a very easy track to get around. They have a pretty reliable, pretty consistent tram system where you can get between the infield and the grandstands. I walked the full length of the grandstands a few times, honestly, throughout the weekend because
Mm-hmm.
we were parked out in the sort of exit of the final turn, that lot, whatever that was,
Lot four,
um,
yeah.
lot four, and watching the start of the race, we were as far down to the very far end of the grandstands towards NASCAR turn one as you could get. So having to make that walk a couple times was something that we were definitely doing. But once you're inside the track, you can pretty much get anywhere. You can walk to the campsites. Some people, it seems like most of the people are very friendly and letting you walk around there. Everything from the International Horseshoe around to this other, the second horseshoe, I don't think it has a name, is open as well. We lost you, man. You're dark now.
Oh no.
It's like the fog
Carry on.
again.
I think carry on.
Yeah, but lots to keep yourself occupied once you are in. There's sort of a separate area inside the track as well for food and everything over there if you're not interested in doing that in the stands. And it is interesting how I've made this comparison before when it comes to tracks like Watkins Glen. I don't know if you've noticed this too, but there are certain areas of Watkins Glen that feel like straight out of the 70s. And actually, I could say this about the Nürburgring as well, having been there last year. And then there are areas that are built up, more secure, and that's very much what Daytona is. The grandstands has their own security. You're not allowed to bring a tripod, a monopod in. You got restrictions on coolers and all these things. You go to the infield, it's pretty much free reign to do whatever you want. So,
Yeah. Camera battery died. That's what happened. So
on the spot
I gotta do
troubleshooting is awesome.
an endurance podcast needs a pit stop, right? So
Yeah, well,
I'll get that figured out here over the next couple minutes. But yeah, to kind of give my thoughts, or to answer El Noob's question, yeah, I was up in turn one, the grandstands there in turn one as well. There's so many great spots to watch from around the track, though. Maybe not fantastic viewing spots like you might see at some other tracks. But it's such a unique viewpoint to be able to climb up to the top of the Daytona grandstands and just look down at you can see the entire track from up there. Another really unique and cool spot is the Ferris wheel at night. I know, been talking, for the last couple of years, like, oh, I didn't get up in the Ferris wheel, didn't bring cash or whatever with me, and I finally got up in the Ferris wheel this year. The Ferris wheel's a really cool spot. There's some grandstands with some kind of neat perspectives around the International Horseshoes. Like there's some cool spots around Daytona, despite it being generally a very very flat track. So it has its decent viewing spots, and there's always stuff to do. While the race is going on as well. There's the big midway that you can go and check out some of the activations that manufacturers have there. I just mentioned the Ferris wheel. Walking through the paddock when if there's been an incident for somebody and just, swinging by and checking out how that crew is trying to handle those repairs. There's a lot that you can do, especially at Daytona for that race.
Yeah. All right, man. It's been an hour. We've been talking about Daytona for an hour, and if we do that 24 more times, well, we've got a whole race that we've been discussing there. So I'm going to cut us short there. Not really short, but move things on at least to what we want to discuss as the main thing this episode, or I guess the headline story. One being that Acura slash Honda might finally be making that jump over to the hypercar class in the WEC. Now, this is something that's been long rumored. We've been talking about it since 2023 when Acura showed up in IMSA with the ARX-06, and we're very hesitant to join the WEC with that car. When asked in the past continuously, they've always said, well, it's, I guess if you ask David Salters from HRC US, he'd say, oh, it's not our decision, it's Honda Japan. And that question gets brought up at least once a year. Hey, is there any progress? Any chance we're going to see that car racing at Le Mans? Nope, go ask Honda Japan. And that's sort of the way it's been for the last 3 years now. But it seems like finally maybe there's some light at the end of that tunnel, because with the season back underway and a lot more people spending time around the paddock, we're starting to get those questions asked again. And this year it seems like we might actually have a path forward for Honda racing in the hypercar class in 2027. Just hitting some of the highlights from the story I saw. I first saw this reported by Thibaut Vimont from the race, quickly picked up by Daily Sports Car, who Stephen Kilby and Graham Goodwin threw in their 2 cents as well, and it's been more widely reported since then. What's important to note is that this is not a done deal yet. Unless something has changed in the last week, there has not been a pen on paper. This is absolutely going to happen. But quoting what was said in that article from the race, it says, Honda Racing Corporation has never been closer to return to the top class of the WEC, and a final decision is expected to be taken in the coming weeks. Now, this would be structured similar to what we're seeing over in IMSA, where you have Meyer Shank Racing running that program. It's not a fully Honda factory run program. In the case of the WEC, it seems like Inter Europol is the top contender to run that program over there. And I got to say, just quick aside, what a manufacturer team pairing that would be if that were to happen, because you're talking about, number one, a manufacturer who's won the Rolex 24 at Daytona. Alongside Porsche, has maybe been the strongest manufacturer in the GTP class in IMSA since 2023. And then, of course, you look at Inter Europol, Le Mans winners from last year and 2023. They won the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship in LMP2 in 2024. If you go down the list of teams that were racing at Le Mans last year in LMP2, they're probably the top one you're going to want to pick from. I mean, you have other teams like United that are joining, of course, McLaren for next year. The pool is starting to run a little bit more dry than it used to, with teams that you can partner with for a top-class prototype program. And I think Inter Europol, that Polish squad, would be an incredible signing if it were to happen.
Yeah. I think you kind of you hit a lot of it right there. Like I think I saw something from Graham Goodwin on I think it was on X. Somebody said, or somebody had mentioned, like, oh, it's like, remember that these are just kind of rumors. And Graham piped in and said, like, this is much more than a rumor at this point. Like, we wouldn't be covering it with the not with the level of seriousness. Is that, I don't know if that's the right
a word
way to phrase that. Well, we'll roll with that. You know what I'm saying. We wouldn't be covering this with the level of, taking this as seriously as we are if this was just a rumor. So it does seem like this could be one of those, we're just waiting for the formal announcement of it. And if that is the case, then that's fantastic, right? Like, as you said, we've been waiting for Honda or Acura or HRC to make this jump into the WEC with this car, and it's proven that it's a worthy competitor in IMSA, and it's ready to be tested on the world stage in some some huge races. Notably the 24 Hours of Le Mans. So, um, partnering with Inter Europol was honestly a bit of a surprise. I thought, that was I wasn't expecting them to be the ones, but hey, I guess if what bakery sales are good, then you can you can run a GTP program. Um, but yeah, very capable hands. Like these guys have won. It seems like just about they've won a lot, right? You mentioned, yeah, they've won an IMSA, they've won in the WEC. They just kind of win everywhere that they go. So this does seem to be a solid little partnership that could be brewing between Honda and Inter Europol. And if this gets confirmed, then I think immediately we kind of turn to who could possibly be running some of these cars if Honda jumps into the WEC. You would think that a guy like a Kakuota would probably be right at the top of their list of drivers that they would want to have running in that car. But it kind of opens up a larger can of worms that that we'll be able to talk about. But I mean, let's not count our chickens before they hatch, I suppose. Nothing is confirmed yet, but this is definitely very positive and exciting news, I think, coming out of Honda slash Acura slash HRC.
Yeah. Well, if it's confirmed, you're talking about a driver pool now that's even more interesting than it already has been, because we're talking about drivers that are jumping ship all over the place right now. I mean, the whole world in sports car racing, especially prototype racing, is awash right now with Porsche, who may be coming back. I guess we'll talk about that in a minute. But there's definitely some uncertainty there. Roger Penske seems optimistic about that, so maybe that's another piece that we throw into the puzzle. But right now, there's a lot of drivers who are coming off of that Porsche program who right now are just sort of riding out the end of that Porsche contract. Maybe they'll jump to Genesis. Some are already going to be jumping to Ford. McLaren has signed, as well. And if we get Honda racing in the WEC on top of all of that, then the puzzle pieces are all over the place right now.
Yeah, 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 and Milton makes did a pretty good job of compiling the ARX06's resume in the chat. Winning the Rolex 24. They've won the 12 Hours of Sebring. They've won Petit Le Mans. They won the 6 Hours of the Glen last year too, I think, if I'm not mistaken, and that nearly stole the manufacturer's title from Porsche. Let's not forget that Acura would have won the championship in 2023,
Yes.
the first year of GTP, had it not been for that penalty. And I think they still finished second in the final standings that year, despite that 100, or despite losing, what was it, all of their points from that race, plus like an additional penalty of something. I can't remember what the exact penalty was, but despite all those penalties, they still finished, they were right there in the championship. That car is very, very strong and would be a strong LMDH entry in the WEC.
Yeah, well, I can throw a couple more praises to Inter Europol as well. I mean, you're talking about just an IMSA. Sebring winners last year, second and third in the LMP2 class at Daytona last week. So when you say it's a surprising team, I understand what you're saying, but if you look at their results, and this is a relatively new team as well, all things considered.
Yeah.
I mean, are you going to find a stronger team that's not already affiliated with somebody else at this point?
I mean, yeah, there's teams that you could probably put an argument for. Like, you could make an argument for, an AO Racing or something that's, kicked the tires on it. But again, like, they're already really associated with a manufacturer, right? Inter Europol is not necessarily. But that being said, I think you're kind of talking like 1A, 1B, and 1C when you put all those put all those teams together. Like, yeah, I said I was surprised, and it's honestly, I think, more of a reaction because I wasn't necessarily expecting it. But the more that you sit down and think about it, like, yeah, that's a strong entry and a strong team that, I it seems like has, a little bit of financial backing behind them too, that could, help support a manufacturer like Honda coming into and competing in a championship like the WEC.
Yeah. Um, Talking about the last time we've seen a Honda powered entry in the WEC was actually, fittingly, Meyer Shank Racing back in the
Was it that
2016
one?
24 Hours of Le Mans when they ran the Ligier JSP2. It's Mike Shank Racing at the time, actually. Lawrence Vantor was a driver in that car, if I'm not mistaken. So
Hmm.
who knows? He might be on the market for next year. We'll see. Um, I want to talk about the potential list of manufacturers, though, that this brings us up to, because you're talking about we have this 40 car cap in the WEC. Maybe that gets expanded to like 42, but we're sort of pushing the limits of what they're able to actually work with. Um, right now, though, I'll go down the list of manufacturers you can certainly expect next year would be Aston Martin, BMW, Cadillac, Ferrari, Ford, Genesis, Honda, McLaren, Peugeot, Toyota, Alpine, maybe. We're going to talk about that in a second. Porsche? I don't know. I mean, as I said, Roger Penske during interviews during the 24 weekend seemed very optimistic of even saying we will be back with Porsche at Le Mans. Okay, Roger. You know something we don't, I guess, but we'll see. He was wording that like he wanted that to be a 1-year hiatus. Porsche
Yeah.
back in the WEC in 2027. They've had a change up in their management as well. So who knows? At that point, you're looking at 20 cars minimum, and that's assuming 2 cars each from the list of ones that I said you can definitely expect. If you throw on an additional 4, if Alpine and Porsche race, if you throw on a customer car from AF Corsa, you're looking at 24, 25 cars. I think that's really pushing it, but you are looking at what would be a record number of cars in this class. We're up from 17 that we have racing in 2026.
Yeah, that's kind of wild. I mean, it's you got to think that it eats into the LMGT3 grid, for sure. You're probably, man, those would be some tough decisions to have if you're cutting, some of these manufacturers that have maybe been racing in the series for a little bit. Um, Man, yeah, you're not going to complain about the top class and top class growth like that. That's pretty incredible. If we could be sitting here talking about, what'd you say? We could, if everything comes together, we could have up what, 12 manufacturers in top class,
Uh,
something like that.
well, it'd be 10 to 12, yeah.
So that's even what we have right now is pretty impressive. But yeah, you throw in the McLaren that we know is coming, the Genesis, the Ford, add in Honda, and holy smokes, that's that's pretty wild. Like that would be bigger than the first year growth of the hypercar class, wouldn't it? When we switched to LMDH, if we had like 4 new manufacturers come in, or that would be bigger, right? Because you already had Peugeot and Toyota that were racing.
Yes. Peugeot,
And then I guess you
Toyota.
had Ferrari, Porsche, Cadillac. BMW didn't join right away.
No.
I guess you had I guess you had oh the Van Wall. I guess
Yeah.
technically you could count them. But you
So
got
it
to
was about
think
the
that this
same.
but this could be the largest grid growth, number of car growth in 1 year that we've seen in the hypercar class, perhaps. Potentially.
Yes.
It has the potential to
Yes.
be that.
Well,
Which is kind
no,
of
because
crazy.
grid growth I think would be a stretch, right? Because you're talking like if
Oh
you're
yeah, I
lucky,
guess we had like customer cars come in too, so.
yeah. Um, David Lane in the chat saying nice quarters that mate. Yeah, you know what? This was just my it's freaking cold thing that I was wearing today, and then I was like, oh, there's a little thing on there that says Honda, and we're going to talk about Honda, so I just kept it. Um, But that's my little aside. Yeah, I mean, I don't need to talk anymore about that, right? You have what
Yeah.
would undeniably be a record number. No, it wouldn't be 3 manufacturers coming in 2027 because we got Genesis coming next year. But Ford,
Oh,
McLaren, and
yes,
Honda
true.
all joining would, even if Alpine were to leave, I don't need to talk about how huge that would be for the series.
Yeah. It's a big time in sports car racing, right? We've beat the dead horse on that over the last couple of years. It's whatever the golden, the platinum age, whatever you want to call it. It's a pretty massive time.
Yeah. And David, you're late. I know you had your own show that you were doing tonight, but Penske's still trying to bring the Porsche back. Yeah, I already touched on that a couple times. Um, all right. Well, look, I've said a couple days ago that sports car racing, prototype racing is a seesaw right now, right? You can't have one piece of good news without a piece of bad news seemingly coming right after it.
True.
Um, and I think it was the same day, maybe the day after. Same guy, Tebow, over on the race, just jumping all of people in the industry, figuring out these sources. I don't know what he's doing. But, French guy, French series, connect the dots.
Oh, clever.
Telling us that Alpine is likely, maybe, going to be leaving the hypercar class in 2027. So, the same time we're talking about all of this. There's a lot of things that I wanted to unpack. I will link the article down below. As always, would encourage you to read that because I'm going to paraphrase in respect to the article itself. But there's a lot of restructuring going on within that Alpine/Renault group as a whole right now. And if you're a fan of sports car racing, you know that there's one word that's scarier than BOP. It's restructuring, because that's generally what leads to programs getting tossed to the side. We've seen this before with Porsche most recently. Audi, if you want to look back at the Dieselgate, when they were restructuring their priorities in motorsport, that's when that program fell aside. So there's your terrifying word of the day in sports car racing. But in addition to that, several high-ranking executives are expected to be either moving within the company or just departing as a whole. You have to look at Renault in Formula One this year. They've stopped producing their own engines, their own power units in Formula One. They've moved to Mercedes power in 2026. So that's all no longer a thing with them. And then there's also uncertainty about the future of the Alpine brand itself. This is a brand that was heavily rumored, I guess still is being rumored to potentially come stateside. It has been delayed, though. That introduction was, I believe, already supposed to have happened by now.
Yeah.
To have some road cars in North America. Haven't seen that yet. Still don't really know what the plan is on whether or not that actually will happen. But I can tell you, at least a couple of years ago, there were a couple of teams that were in discussion with Alpine about racing that car in the GTP class. You can look at some teams that lost programs early on in the GTP days as a hint to who those might have been. That never came to fruition. Some of those teams have since moved on to other manufacturers. But really, on top of all of this, I think what was most interesting to me from this article is that there was actually uncertainty about that team coming back, that manufacturer coming back this year in 2026. The WEC entry list came out pretty late this year. I think a lot of people were expecting that was just because of uncertainty with the Proton 963 program, whether or not maybe Penske would jump in and help bankroll that program for another year. That didn't end up happening. But according to this article, the other reason that entry list came out late is because we didn't have confirmation that Alpine would be here until very late as well. They ultimately did make that decision. They extended it for one season, and we'll see where that leaves us for 2027. But I will say it leaves me feeling skeptical, right? As I mentioned, when you mention these restructuring efforts within manufacturers, these programs are typically the ones that usually will get the boot. So quite a bit to unpack there. I talked for a little while on that one, but would be a big downfall for Alpine in the span of a couple of years, having expected them to maybe come over to IMSA, finally picking up podiums and race wins in the WEC, and it looks like all of that might be coming to a pretty soon end.
Yeah, that would be quite unfortunate if that came to light. It seems like the Alpine is a car that maybe isn't a fan favorite among a ton of people, but also is not like hated by the group, right? Like I think I kind of get the feeling that the sports car racing fan world doesn't hate when Alpine does well, because I think we can understand. They were one of the cars that was running in hypercar when there was what, like two true hypercars on that grid, plus the grandfathered in Alpine there in the early going. Like they've been kind of a fixture on the hypercar and in the WEC on the grid there for a number of years now, and to see them leave would suck. It would suck to see a program like that shudder. But we we've seen it with Alpine and kind of their F1 effort as well. The how how things have kind of shifted over there, and it's not the same program that it was X number of years ago. And ultimately, like, Alpine with the parent company of Renault is owned by like the French government, right? Um, so it might be a little bit more difficult to justify a large spending on a motorsport program.
Is that
Um,
true?
I think it is. Well, yeah, Alpine is like a subsidiary or basically of Renault, right?
Well, yeah, of Renault, but the ownership from the French government?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Isn't it the French government that owns Renault? Maybe somebody confirm
That's
that in the
news to
chat
me.
for us.
I don't think that's true.
I'm
Not
pretty
talking
sure
like
that
Air
it.
France here. I mean, this
I'm
is why
pretty
we do this
sure.
live. I'll just look it up.
I could be completely wrong and just talking to my butt here, but I'm pretty sure that Renault is owned by the government there. But I mean,
15%.
oh, okay. I thought it was more than that. Okay. That's they still technically it's not wrong. They still are owned partially by the government.
The French
Uh,
national team here.
um, but regardless, that's nobody. We don't want to see any car leave. But the fact that they approved it for this year, I mean, we know of plenty of manufacturers that take this on a year by year sort of basis. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that we were worried about if BMW was going to have a future, sort of on the on the IMSA grid. Like we were worried that they might call it and just race in the WEC or something. So, um, yeah, I mean, hopefully Alpine and the whatever executives that are being shuffled around there recognize the value of hopefully that the program brings, and they can keep that on the grid. But at the same time, if there's a time where the sport can afford to lose a manufacturer as well, it's a time like this, where we have, we just talked about, three, potentially four manufacturers that could be coming to the WEC grid. And yeah, there are a lot worse things that could be happening right now.
Yeah, and one of those things I missed actually. Let's get another super chat from Al Noob. Um, is the manufacturer Cherry? I guess is how I'd pronounce it.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
they had outlined that 5-year plan back in December for getting a hypercar on the grid in the WEC with the Exceed brand. It is a Chinese manufacturer. Um, I'm not expecting to see them on the grid in 2027. To me, that's like a 2028, 2029 maybe thing. You're talking about the regulation cycle being close to an end at that point, unless it gets extended again. Um, but another manufacturer that we're looking at who's at least throwing their coin in the water, we'll say, for
Yeah.
joining in the future.
That could be a it's a bit of a stretch, but who knows, right? We've been surprised before.
Yeah, I mean, we had a Sada Fraschini on the grid. I didn't know who they were.
Well, They lasted
If
a
you
really
have
long time.
if you have Chinese EV money behind you, I have a lot more confidence than maybe something like that. Just
That's
put it that
true.
way.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. It's a really good point.
Um, yeah, I mean, to sort of drive this all home, though, we'll be hearing more about this one way or the other in the coming months. I'd expect as the WEC season gets underway, that's probably when you'd expect to hear more things out of this camp. Um, I'm curious when you'd get an actual official confirmation. One of the things that I actually heard at Daytona is I don't know if you remember the Cadillac Ganassi fallout was very early in the season. I want to say it was like after Sebring or
It
something before
was.
Long
Yeah.
Beach. And I know that was a bit of a pain point, or heard that was a bit of a pain point for Cadillac, that news was made public so early. So I don't know if that's something that would be officially confirmed early in the season, or you have to wait until later. But now that the idea is out, there's certainly going to be more questions asked about it.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's just going to be a distraction for them throughout especially the early portion of the season when, we're going to be heading into a fresh season, with all the excitement, but they're going to be asked about, what is your future in the sport when the
Yep.
season hasn't even started yet.
Yep. And you say you don't know if they're anybody's favorites. I love the Alpine. That, that car.
I mean, the
To
point that I was
me,
trying to make is like nobody hates Alpine, right?
well,
Like I
I know
haven't.
I'm grilling
I
you
mean,
now.
that's yeah.
I'm grilling you now.
I
If you
deserve
do
it.
have a
I
chance to
deserve
go
it.
see that car at Coda or anywhere, maybe I'll push you to go to Le Mans this year,
True.
so you can see it before it potentially goes away. But to me, that's one of the best looking LMDH cars in the grid. And actually, even though it's pretty quiet, sounds really great as well. Like that car shows how good a V6 can sound when it's turbocharged. So would
Say
definitely be a big
less.
loss in my eyes.
Yeah. Yeah, it would suck to not see that lovely blue and white and red livery on the grid.
French national team.
Yeah, French national team. That
Now I know.
apparently I don't know everything about.
All right, I think we can bring this home. There's one more question that I should have answered when we were talking about the Honda stuff. Kind of forgot about it.
Well, we're still talking about the Honda. Well, we're still
Well, we're
adjacent.
adjacent. Yeah, good enough. Formula Jonah asked if Honda joins the hypercar class, will Yuki Tsunoda switch from F1 to join full time in the ARX 06 following his departure from Red Bull? His only other F1 option would be to look at Aston Martin. To my knowledge, Tsunoda is not signed with Honda yet for 2026. Of course, he was a Honda youth driver, went up through their development program, was signed and affiliated with Honda for years. I had to go look before this episode to see what the most recent news was on that, and there was an article from motorsport.com saying that he hasn't signed a continuation of his contract for Honda yet. So whether or not that actually happens, we'll see. Personally, if you ask me, I'd say maybe IndyCar is more likely than going over to a prototype program. Of course, if he were to stay affiliated with Honda and Honda joins the WEC, then there's a good tie in there. It seems like a lot of people are making that jump from F1 to sports car racing or F1 to IndyCar, so it's probably one or the other. But it's a little bit of a tough call right now. It really depends what his future with Honda looks like more than anything.
Yeah, and maybe what he's comfortable doing as well, because we know we've heard a lot of ex F1 drivers maybe aren't super comfortable with the idea of running the ovals in IndyCar, which is obviously a huge part of that calendar. Maybe not as big as it once was, but it's still a consideration for some drivers. So that could play a factor in there as well. But I mean, if he's still a Honda driver, I mean, he's probably just going to go where Honda tells him to go to. If Honda is saying, yeah, we're going to put you in IndyCar, then probably you're going IndyCar. Or if you're going to the WEC, then that's not so bad of a landing spot, I would say.
Well, I was going to say, when Honda throws you two options and they're racing either two of the biggest races of the Triple Crown,
Yeah, true.
I guess you don't have that much of a tough life.
Yeah, and you're going to immediately be competing for race wins as well. It's
Yeah.
not like the
Well,
ARX is a back marker.
I really need David in the chat again. He left too early if he's not here
Yeah,
anymore,
true.
because I know there was a tie-in with Dale Coyne Racing and IndyCar at the end of last year. I don't know if that's been talked about anymore since then. In fact, I think they know who's taking that seat now. So I don't know. I don't know if Sonoda has a future in either series right now, but time will tell.
Yep, the old "we will see."
We will see. All right. Any closing thoughts from you?
No, to kind of wrap up the Rolex 24, I saw a lot of actually, you know, not super positive thoughts on the race. With the big fog, full course yellow. Actually, I think there was a comment from earlier that, the GTP race may not have been as competitive as in some previous years, but I'd honestly argue, like, I thought that this year's race, apart from the 6 hour full course yellow period, was pretty great. We talked about the great racing that we saw in GTP, or sorry, in GTD Pro and GTD. We saw a good battle as well in LMP2 once they kind of got settled in there. They were able to, we saw some great battles throughout the rest of that race. And then in GTP, we saw all four of the main manufacturers like have their moments in this race. We saw, even though BMW didn't show pace throughout much of the week, we saw them lead some laps in that final third of the race. We saw Acura up towards the front and kind of pressuring the Porsches at one point. And then we saw Cadillac and Porsche kind of running the show at the end. So, maybe it didn't have a fireworks moment like we've had in some previous years, but I thought it was overall a pretty satisfying, Rolex 24, and I think it sets us up well for what we're going to be in for this year. I thought it was a great opening to the season, and yeah, looking forward to Sebring in a little over a month, maybe 5-6 weeks.
Yeah, yeah. Well, here's what it boils down to me is this old saying, which I love, which is that expectation is the thief of joy, right?
True.
So I think if you look at the end of the IMSA season last year, banger race after banger race, we didn't have a whole lot of complaints at the end of last year. VIR onwards, Indy was good. Petit Le Mans was great. Starting out the season, you don't quite have that same momentum. You have new drivers in these cars, new teams, upgraded GTP cars almost across the board, and a 6 hour fog yellow to boot, all of it. So, I would agree with you. What we saw wasn't it wasn't a bad race, is what I would say. Certainly wasn't a bad race. Maybe a little bit disappointing, possibly, if your expectations were set high going in, which I think for a lot of people is really what it was.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're going to take a bit of a break here. We got the Olympics coming up on NBC, so no IMSA on NBC until Sebring. But it's a good time for me to pretend like I'm a fan of all these sports. You're going to have to tell me about curling, of course. Teach me the rules, teach me everything I got to know about that. Maybe I'll shoot you some messages, but I get to enjoy the sliding stuff as well. Getting Diffie to call that.
Lee Diffie's calling curling? Oh,
no, not curling. The sliding sports.
I was like, what? Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Maybe I'll take advantage of the cold weather as well and finally get out on skis myself. I just bought some and I haven't touched them yet, so
there you go.
Got to take advantage of it while we have it.
Yeah, I mean, there's not going to be that much racing going on. There's always some sort of racing. I guess what's Bathurst? That's coming up soon, isn't it?
Well, they pushed that back a few weeks this year. I think it's a couple weeks. So 2 weeks? I don't think it's this weekend.
Yeah, it might be like a week and a half from now. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. All right. That's enough for us, though. Appreciate everybody who tuned in, whether you're here live or on a podcast platform. We'll be back in a couple of weeks to recap whatever gets dropped in between now and then. Hope to see you all there. Take care.